welcome to this edition of BrandBuzz. I'm Ankita Saxena. Well, Kantar has launched the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Indian Brands that have reached a combined value of $523.5 billion in 2025, accounting for approximately 13% of the nation's GDP, according to the newly published report. Now, this year's ranking has expanded to include 100 brands with the total brand value rising 6% on a year-on-year basis and 34 brands increasing their value. These results underscore the increasing significance of brand value in India's economic story, with further opportunities to grow through global expansion. And today I'm joined by Staplehurst, who's the global head of BrandZ, and Soumya Mohanty, who's the India lead for BrandZ, joining us to weigh in on the report. Hi, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us, to both Graham and Soumya. Right. Firstly, talk to us about the highlights of the report. What are the brands that have really stood out for you this time round?
Yeah, so let me start, Ankita. So this year is a great year because we have expanded our list from 75 to 100. We normally used to value and rank 75 brands. So this year we have expanded the list to 100 brands. It's also the 20th year of BrandZ. So now we have 20 years of data which we can analyze. It's the world's largest ranking. It's the world's only database of consumer equity data for a huge number of brands across something like 54 countries. So now coming to the India BrandZ report, the highlights are that if I look at the top 75 brands that we have been consistently ranking, there has been a slight deceleration. The growth is around 6% on a like-to-like basis, which is at par with our GDP growth. But obviously, there is an opportunity to have grown faster. So there is a slight deceleration, and it compares to about a 29% growth in the global top 100. So that's the first big point. In terms of composition of the top 10, there has been some changes. So we have HDFC, which is now our new number one. It was TCS last year. TCS has slipped one rank. Airtel is our number 3 brand, is also the fastest growing brand in the top 10 brands. It's also there in the global top 100 brands. So fabulous performance by Airtel. And in the top 10 this year, because we have added cement as a category, we have a stunning debut at number 7 of Ultratech, which has also meant that Asian Paints has got displaced from the top 10. Hopefully it'll come back next year. But as of the moment, Ultratech is there at number 7. So that's the top 10. If I look at the fastest rising brands, Zomato is the fastest rising brand, 69% growth in brand value. And Zomato is an incredible example of a food tech brand that has actually almost become an experience brand today, a food experience brand with food at the center of it, but way bigger than just food. So Zomato is one big riser. Apart from Zomato, a lot of the brands in what you would call experience economy have gained value. So Make My Trip, Indigo, Taj have all gained a lot of value. They're all in our risers list. So that the other part of it, the fast risers are all coming a lot from the consumer tech and the experience economy side. And the final point I'll round it off to say is the enduring importance of building consumer equity, which for us in Kantar is being meaningful, being different, and being salient. That is getting more and more reinforced as growth becomes not as easy to get. So we have been seeing some erosion in meaningful difference across the top brands. And there is about a third of the top 100 brands that is low on meaning and difference, which is not a good sign for future. So it is a bit of a wake-up call for all brands to reinvest in building stronger consumer connection and in innovating so that they can remain different and differentiated.
So Soumya, you spoke about deacceleration of almost 6% and erosion of brand meaning. What can that be attributed to?
So the deacceleration is something that, there has been a consumption deacceleration, which we all are aware of, and which is why there have been so many, the discretionary income hasn't grown to the same degree. And therefore, people have been, trading between categories, trading between brands, sometimes dropping consumption. So there are certain categories which are more stressed, like the consumer packaged goods category, which has now had 2 continuous years of decline in brand value. Now, within that, some brands have done better, but there is a general stress in that category. There's a general stress actually across categories. So in that sense, a lot of this is because consumers' own discretionary income hasn't grown to the same pace as you would expect. There is a K-shaped recovery, which is also playing up here because the mass end of it has been stressed and the premium has been growing. So obviously, again, that does cause the growth hasn't been as inclusive. So these are the 2 broad factors, I would say. And so that's as far as the ranking goes. And as far as the erosion goes of meaning and difference, that's not a new thing. That's been happening for quite some time. It's just that when growth is easier to have because everything is growing, like a rising tide raises all boats, then it doesn't hit you as hard as it hits you when growth is not so easy to get.
So Graham, like Soumya mentioned, the report is a huge data pool of global brands and brands globally. What's working for the brands globally versus what's working for them in India?
Well, I mean, to follow on from some of the points that Soumya was making, we see on a very long-term analysis that, first of all, brands are and remain and are increasingly the biggest asset that a business owns. So therefore, they need to be treated as such. They need to get that investment. And companies that invest in their brands are seeing faster growth of corporate share price and of corporate brand value, enterprise value, than brands and companies that don't invest. So that's sort of like the first thing. And then what we also see are commonly cycles of category popularity, if you like. So our brand valuations are a combination of the perceptions of the investment market and the perceptions of the consumers and the decision makers that are choosing those brands. And when certain categories, so for example, at the moment, it's all about tech and AI driven benefits within technology, those companies are getting the lion's share of investment. That's where the investment community are most optimistic and are therefore raising their estimates of those, the value of those companies and therefore their share prices to the highest levels we've ever seen. Now, that doesn't mean to say that that will stay. 2 years ago, we saw a drop of 20% in value across the global top 100 because of a correction that happened in market perceptions. And what happens is that if you've got a strong brand, then you will actually be able to resist those declines and corrections. You'll be more resilient to the market shocks. And we go back over the global economic crisis and the banking crisis of 2008. We've got the COVID crisis of 2020. So we've seen these cycles happen before, and we can see how our data shows brands that have stronger equity in the minds of consumers and decision makers, those are the brands that recover fastest, are most resilient, lose least out to those shocks that happen in the economy. And the same thing will be happening with the Indian brands. So even though these brands, say, for example, the FMCG brands that haven't grown this year, they will still have been preserving more of their value due to their strength and their equity than would otherwise have been the case.
Right. So BrandZ's top 100 most valuable Indian brands have reached a combined value of $523 billion in 2025, accounting for approximately 13% of the country's GDP. How do these results underscore the increasing significance of brand value in India's economic story?
It is extremely important. And in fact, it's higher than the global brand value as a percentage of the global GDP. I'm not sure whether that's a fair comparison, but that's the reality, 13% versus 8%. Now, should it be 13% or should it be 20% is the question. And therefore, I think the point is not that the brands are important. There is no question. And branded growth is also important. But probably brands can grow even faster because there is so much more headroom in India compared to most other parts of the world. So I would actually say one would expect even faster growth because there is so much more headroom, because our GDP itself is growing at 6.5%. That's the estimated growth in GDP. So one would expect branded value growth to exceed GDP growth. I mean, that's at least the hope one would have for a resilient, dynamic, country like ours.
So HDFC Bank once again has become India's most valuable brand. That's up 18% to nearly $45 billion. Now, as India's largest private sector bank, HDFC has seen its brand value increase by 377% since the first BrandZ India report that released in 2014. What have been the growth drivers for HDFC?
Consistency and agility. I think these are the two simple things. So already HDFC is in a sector like banking and financial services, which has tailwinds to some extent. It is a very consistent brand. It doesn't deviate from what it stands for as far as consumers are concerned. It's an accessible, approachable, relevant brand. And it has, in its own way, been agile to they did that entire vigilante campaign at one point in time when they wanted to talk about safety. They are both consumer facing, and they have done a lot, I think, at the back end as well, right, in terms of making the processes more efficient, driving digital banking. So they, as a category leader, they have done everything a category leader should be doing. Consistently investing, both in terms of processes, improving efficiencies internally, but also remaining equally invested in their customer experience and in their customer communication. So what a category leader should do, I think that's what HDFC is a playbook of, and that's why it has pretty much remained in the top two since the time we started this entire journey.
If I can come in as well, I'd just add as well that financial services and banking, of course, is quite a regulated category. So disruption is harder to achieve in that category. But it is, helping to protect itself in case there is more deregulation in future, in case there are opportunities for disruption. So we've seen fintechs in Western Europe, for example, and new banks emerging in places like Brazil, which have disrupted the status quo. So as a brand, it is making sure it is as safe as it possibly can be. And another example of that in India is Airtel, which I think is a fantastic example of a brand that was disrupted, very heavily disrupted, when the market changed with the entry of Jio, and yet has recovered and retained and grown further, so that it is still one of the top 3 brands in India. It's one of the top teleco brands in the world, and I often hold it up around the world as I go around to talk to the clients in different countries as a great example of how to recover from potential disruption. It didn't become a Kodak, it didn't become a BlackBerry, it survived and thrived.
Well, that's an interesting example. But Graham, what are the challenges for brands today? Disruption is one of them, as you mentioned. But besides that, what are the challenges for brands globally and in India?
Well, globally, I think, we know brands are there for a reason. Okay, brands are there because they make life easier for consumers. When consumers are faced with a huge amount of choice and very little knowledge about products and services, brands help them to navigate through that environment in a fast, efficient, and simple way. So maintaining that as a brand is the challenge, keeping on refreshing consistently what you stand for, and at the same time being able to look at disruption when it occurs as an opportunity for change is really, really important. Now, what we're seeing as well is a lot of change in the way that marketing is deployed. And we see that there's been, over the last decade, a massive shift to performance advertising, for example, where a lot of money is being focused right at the very end of the consumer decision process. What we see is a risk for brands is if they fail to invest for the long term at the earlier stages, when they talk to people, when they're not even thinking about buying or choosing within a category, but getting those mental associations established early on so that they don't need to think about the decisions that they're taking as much, because you've already predisposed those people to choose your brand. So that's one of the challenges that we see, marketers getting distracted by short-termism and failing to get support to invest for their brands in the long term.
And if I was to take on from what Graham has said, you see exactly the same thing in India. And what makes it probably even more challenging in India is while in most markets across the world, especially in the more developed markets in the West, it's more about gaining share. In India, it's about building categories. There's so much headroom to grow. There are so many consumers who have not even adopted into a category, not even started the journey of branded consumption. So there is so much. There are so many layers to India. There is growth at the premium end. There is growth where you are recruiting new consumers into a category, where you are getting them habituated to consuming something on an ongoing basis. There is a lot of depth that you can get in India at a brand and a category level. So when you fall into short-termism, then you are missing an entire potential of just unlocking this massive consumer market that India is, and expecting only the government to do something like reducing income tax or working on the GST that they have done. Beyond a point, that's not enough. We will have to do something to create demand on our own as brands.
And of course, finally, there is that opportunity that we're seeing. For example, Chinese brands are increasingly taking up now of expanding outside domestic market and looking at the rest of the world as a marketplace as well. And that, I think, again, will probably be within 20 to 30 years, the biggest opportunity for Indian brands.
So there are 18 newcomers that have entered India's new top 100 ranking. What paved their entry into the ranking?
So not all the 18 that have entered can be called disruptors. We have expanded the list. So automatically you have lowered the entry point at which you can enter. It's about 1 billion now, 1 billion now. So a lot of the what you would call legacy brands have also entered in because they were getting off the list. Having said that, there are 4 cement brands in that. So it just shows the importance of infra in India's economic growth. So there are 4 big cement brands, including Ultratech, obviously, which is about 14 billion in itself. There are retail brands that I think it's great. We have now a stronger representation of retail brands. You have both e-commerce. You have Meesho that has managed to enter in. We have Studio now. We have Westside, and Westside, in fact, Westside is an app, is classified as apparel. So it's also now there in the global top 20 apparel brands. So what this expansion has done and what the 18 new brands have done is just represents a greater diversity of brands and categories, and therefore a greater width of Indian economy is getting covered through the top 100 ranking.
And I think, again, we've seen McDowell's come in to the global ranking of top 20 alcohol brands, which is, a fantastic result. And it does show that growth can come from anywhere within that whole spectrum of brands and areas. And for me, the fact that Ultratech could come in at number 7, we have to sort of slightly beat ourselves up that we weren't able to value it before. But now we've got the consumer perception data alongside our financial analysis. We've been able to recognize just how much value they have created through making those consumer connections across so many people, and so many consumers and types of consumer in the whole of India. And West Side, as Soumya mentioned, it's actually number 9 in the rank of top apparel brands globally. So, it's almost as big as, say, Asics from Japan.
Finally, as marketers, what is the takeaway from this report as far as the consumer behavior is concerned? What are going to be the top marketing trends that are shaping the country's landscape?
So, if I go first from an India standpoint, I would say, and actually from India and global standpoint, keep investing in your consumer, keep building those meaningful connections, keep innovating so that you are differentiated and you are different from others in the category. And you also need to shape the category. And that is extremely important from India's standpoint. You need to create the category, find new spaces, expand the category. So I think from a consumer behavior standpoint, the consumer is not going to wait for us. She's not going to wait to have discretionary income to spend on us. She'll just move on and spend it on something else, or she will just stop consuming. So we have to create that demand. We have to give us a reason. We as in brands have to give her a reason to buy. I think that is the simple sum total of what consumer behavior that we are seeing. And there's a lot of fragmentation. So it's not that easy for consumers to make choice. So as brands, it's our responsibility to make it easier for consumers to both come to their mind and also for them to be able to find us. From marketing standpoint, I think the India is following the same global trend towards performance marketing, Gen AI, which is all extremely important, especially the way we could very strongly use Gen AI. But I think today it's going a lot more into the optimization space rather than how do we use this to create more growth in many Indias. Is there a way we can, India is multilingual. Is there a way Gen AI can help us communicate in a more personalized way and yet remain real? So there are uses of Gen AI to drive growth, not only to optimize and create efficiencies. So I would say that that's something marketers probably need to consider. And I'll leave Graham to wrap it up.
This is something, that marketers are struggling with everywhere. There's a drive for efficiency, but marketers actually have to be more concerned about effectiveness of their actions, not just how efficient. How can we do more with the same budget every year? It's how can you achieve more, not doing more. Doing more isn't necessarily the right thing. Consistency is the number one priority. You have a brand, it's already got mental associations in the minds of consumers that predispose them to want to buy it and to be willing to pay for it. So you need to keep refreshing those. You don't need to change what you stand for every year. So you don't even need new advertising campaign every year. You need to keep working out what works for me and do more of that rather than just keep trying more and more things. I think, yes, there's a massive opportunity for AI to help streamline many parts of our business, but we're seeing around the world that actually what is most important for brands is getting that human connection. And I think one of the ways that that's best expressed is by its cultural connection. Do brands become part of the culture? Do they insert themselves into the culture? And do they help to create that flow of cultural output from our communities? And brands that can achieve that consistently seem to be able to grow better and have more long-term success.
All right, on that note, Soumya and Graham, thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us on this edition of BrandZ and weighing in with all the data and numbers for brand and the marketing landscape. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of BrandBuzz. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in.